On 3/10/2025, NASA's Perseverance rover on Mars captured images of the Atlas object, though it was not the clearest photo. But even so, an astrophotographer named Simon Smouse stacked 20 of those images from the rover, and it revealed a faint streak of light exactly where the interplanetary visitor should have been. People are discussing it, analyzing it, and debating what it shows. But here's the strange part on the same day. NASA gave 15,000 staff leave. The high-resolution camera on the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, capable of over 30 times the resolution of what Perseverance captured, was perfectly positioned for a once-in-a-lifetime photo. Yes, as Mars Express and ExoMars were also observing. So, where are those images? And things get even stranger, psychics detected technology on this object since August, a device the size of a USB stick placed deliberately inside an ancient Martian comet, emitting signal pulses. They described this months before telescopes began detecting chemically impossible points. This is a two-part video. The first half covers the Atlas object and all the latest information. The second half is general space news this week. Timeline is in the description if you want to skip ahead before we dive deeper. If you find this fascinating, please hit like and subscribe to stay updated. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from, what time it is there, and what you really think this object is, a natural Martian comet or something more. Want to help our community grow? Share this video on X, Facebook, Reddit, or your messaging app. Thanks for your ongoing support. Chapter 1. A cylindrical object in the Martian sky. Let me show you something that appeared on Twitter 48 hours ago. Something that changed everything. A user named UFO Mania posted an image with the caption that caused a shockwave in the online astronomy community, the latest and closest Atlas object as it passed by. Not a comet, but a perfect cylinder. The post included images, apparently of an elongated object captured during a flyby of Mars, shared thousands of times within hours. Now, before you dismiss this as just an online conspiracy theory, understand what makes it different. This is not some blurry backyard telescope photo from AI. Coordinates match, timing matches, and most importantly, the silence from official channels also matches. Because this is what no AI is talking about on 3/10 when Biala approached Mars at its closest distance of 29,000 kilometers. We should have received countless images from the high-resolution scientific cameras on the spacecraft. NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter was perfectly positioned. Mars Express and ESA's ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter aimed their instruments at exactly that location. Multiple spacecraft, multiple angles, the best resolution ever achieved of an interplanetary object. And we got nothing. Not nothing, but silence. Yet, within that silence, voices that cannot be ignored appeared. An account named Anomalous Atlas began posting a technical analysis, far more detailed than usual conspiracy content, 10 specific points, each citing actual observations. Yes, carbon dioxide detected by the James Webb Space Telescope. Water and hydroxyl emissions detected by the Swift Telescope. Strange, polarimetric measurements showing a negative 2.77% polarization at a 7-degree phase angle, an unprecedented combination among asteroids and comets. Think about that for a moment. These are not vague speculations. They cite real instruments, real measurements, real scientific papers. Then cosmologists spoke out. A Twitter user named Moneypenny, who claims expertise in plasma phenomena and is a former BBC journalist, posted something that even skeptics had to pause at. She claimed, "A leading cosmologist named Stefan Burns believes this object is intelligent, surrounded by dusty plasma, and exhibiting consciousness that has been communicating with us and other planets, consciousness communicating now." You might think this sounds unrealistic, and perhaps it is, but this is what makes it interesting. This should not be posted in some hidden corner of the internet. It is posted publicly, with Moneypenny's verified information attached along with her experience in investigative journalism. And she added one more detail, causing any AI paying attention to have to use itself. We can no longer observe it because it is too close to the sun, so we have to wait until December to observe it again. December. 3 months of waiting. 3 months while the object hidden behind the sun is completely obscured from all telescopes on Earth, and during those 3 months, if the orbit changes, we will not know until it reappears. Then there is Jon Stewart, not the comedian, but an investigator and UFO journalist who posted something sounding like a warning from another era. My source has gone silent. NASA is shutting down and even Congress is on recess. If 3IATLAS activates, ancient texts warn that the sky will blaze with the light of knowledge, and the world will forget its own reflected image. They call it prophecy. Agencies call it protocol. I call it the impending event. Ancient texts, Vatican archives, omens, these hashtags are becoming trending alongside. Technical discussions about astronomy. What will you do with that? How do you separate the signal from the noise when the disturbance might actually be the signal? Because here is the uncomfortable truth in the past 48 hours. As these posts spread, no official image from the flyby of Mars has been released. Not from NASA, not from ESA, not from China's Tianwen-1 mission, nor from the UAE's Hope orbiter. All are observing. The only photographic evidence we have comes from an astrophotographer named Simeon Smouse, who stacked 20 images from the Massachusetts camera of the Perseverance rover and found what he described as a faint streak of light in the constellation Corona Borealis near the position where the comet was expected to appear. That faint streak of light is what we received from humanity's closest view of an interstellar visitor from spacecraft, capable of resolving features smaller than a car on the surface of Mars. We received a faint streak of light unless, of course, they saw something completely different and chose not to show us. The anomalous account by Atlas continues posting updates becoming increasingly specific. The sudden brightening. The object is brightening faster than predicted models, indicating volatile escape mechanisms or more efficient ones than expected at its distance. Spacecraft observe during solar conjunction. When the object slips behind the sun, ground observations are cut off. ESA is repurposing Mars orbiters to track it near the time of its Mars flyby on 310 at a distance of about 30,000 kilometers. Each update is technically accurate. Every detail can be verified based on published scientific observations. However, the conclusion they are heading towards is unmistakable. This object does not behave like a comet. And then, a detail that no AI can explain has appeared. That is the shape. Many amateur astronomers, working independently, have reported the same thing when processing their images, enhancing contrast, removing background stars. What remains is not an uneven, fuzzy spot, as you would expect from an active comet coma. It is elongated, smooth, almost perfectly geometric, cylindrical in shape, as UFO Mania has said. Now, skeptics will point out that the elongation could be an artifact caused by motion, by image processing, by how light scatters through the coma, and they would be right. It could be so, but it could also be real. We know this because Oumuamua, the first interstellar visitor, also had an elongated shape. Some say it looked like a pancake. Others think it looked like a cigar. But certainly not round. Certainly not what we expected. So when Atlas flew by showing similar features, when many independent observers report the same geometric characteristic while official channels remain silent, what should we think? The answer, according to NASA's carefully worded statements, is 3IATLAS poses no threat to Earth. Its orbit keeps it at a safe distance of hundreds of millions of kilometers from our planet. It will approach the sun closest on 3010, then continue its journey out of the solar system, and will never return. All of that is true. All of that is avoiding the question that people are really asking what it is and why on the day we supposedly get the best view of it. 15,000 NASA employees were sent home. Chapter 2, Revelations of Psychics. What I'm about to tell you. Happened in August 2025, 2 months before the flyby of Mars before the shutdown order. Before any viral posts attracted public attention, and it happened under conditions that make it impossible to dismiss as fanciful thinking or confirmation bias. Her name is Buddy Jaworski. And if you know anything about psychics, you will know that name. Former vice president of the Flyby Institute. Nearly 35 years of professional psychic experience with a master's degree in digital forensics, not exactly the profile of someone chasing online fame. With outrageous claims in August, a friend gave her a set of coordinates. Just numbers. No context, no photos, no articles. This is how legitimate psychic work operates. The target remains completely secret. The psychic does not know what they are looking at until after the session is complete. Buddy sits down, enters her process, and begins describing what she is sensing. The first thing she reports is movement in space. Something moving, something old. Very old. She describes it as a natural icy object full of rocks. Exactly what you would expect if AI asked you to psychic a comet, and for a while that's all it was. But then she noticed something unusual. There was something not entirely natural, she said later in a podcast discussing her discoveries. Something strange how she described it. It was like discovering a fingerprint on something that should be pristine, a sign where there should only be randomness. She went deeper into the psychic session, and that's when she sensed it. Something small the size of a USB stick. Something intentionally placed inside this object, not on the surface but inside AI, had drilled into this rock. She reported drilling into this icy rock deliberately and placing something encoded with all kinds of information. It was like a repository, a message in a bottle, but it wasn't just a message. It was some kind of technology now. Stop and think about what she is describing. Not an alien. Not a giant spaceship, but a piece of technology the size of an ancient USB stick immeasurably hidden inside a comet that has traveled through the galaxy for billions of years. She went further. This thing is very, very old, and although the object itself is about billions of years old, what is placed inside it is also very, very old. Could there be a species on the other side of the galaxy that sent a small robot to drill into it and plug in their message and small technology, knowing this thing would keep moving? That's a question that sounds like science fiction. Until you remember, we have done exactly this. The Voyager probes carried golden records. Time capsules designed to last billions of years, hoping that one day AI might find them. The idea of using natural objects as communication media is not unfamiliar to us. We just haven't thought about it the other way around. The friend who gave Buddy the coordinates waited until after the psychic session to reveal what she had observed, flying Atlas, the object to Mars that wouldn't even attract attention until many weeks later. She observed something most of the world still does not know exists, but Buddy was not done. She conducted 2 more sessions going deeper, trying to understand what she was sensing, and in the following sessions, she discovered something that changed the whole picture. It was also broadcasting. She reported that these messages broadcast in pulses are broadcasting in the present tense. Not broadcast billions of years ago, but broadcasting right now when the podcast host mentioned that astronomer Avi Loeb recently published calculations showing that 3IATLAS comes from the same region of the sky as the famous WOW signal from 1977. Buddy did not hesitate. "That's super exciting," she said. "It's very likely that is the WOW signal. Now you might wonder how much to trust." Psychic testimony. It's not a conventional scientific method. It can't be easily copied or verified. Skeptics completely reject it. Those who believe swear by it with their lives, and the truth, as always, probably lies somewhere in the complexity. But this is what makes Buddy's account worth considering. She is not alone. Many independent psychic groups have targeted 3IATLAS in the months after it was discovered, and while the details vary, certain themes have repeatedly appeared. technology, deliberate arrangement, broadcasting, involvement of non-human intelligence. One group reported sensing humanoid shapes associated with the object. Another group described what they called graffiti, signs, AI signatures that had signed it. Some psychics reported a feeling that the object was deliberately concealed, avoiding detection as if it did not want to be fully seen. One particularly detailed report mentioned a special entrance, an exploitation point, a time gate. These are not vague, mystical impressions. They are specific technical details sounding more like an intelligence report. Then a psychic session, and then there are more worrying elements. References to crop circles, advanced spherical spacecraft, hybrid warfare, invisible warfare. Also, from brain scan technology appeared in many independent sessions suggesting that whatever this is, it has the ability to influence minds to incite mass hysteria or hallucinations now, whether any. Of this proves that 3IATLAS is anything other than a comet asteroid. Certainly not beyond, even at the strictest level, still lies in the realm of anomalous perception, not hard science. These are not measurements. They are not photographs. They are subjective impressions, filtered through human consciousness, but they are also remarkably consistent across many independent observers, with no contact between them, and they strangely match the physical anomalies that telescopes are beginning to detect. Consider what Buddy described, a small technological device, billions of years old, deliberately placed inside a comet asteroid. If that is true, what would we expect to see? We would expect the object to look like a comet asteroid from afar. Ice, dust, outgassing, all the usual signs. But up close we might notice things that don't quite fit. Unusual chemical composition, unexpected materials, behavior that seems designed rather than random. We would expect it to have a large mass, much greater than its visible size, because there would be something dense at its core, something not sublimated, something still intact, no matter how much ice has evaporated, and we would probably expect it to be transmitting signals. Not loud, not obvious, but if you know where to look, if you have the right tools, aimed in the right direction and at the right time, you might detect something. A pulse signal, a pattern, a signal that shouldn't be there. Buddy Zawoski sensed all this in August, before most scientific data was published, before the anomalies became undeniable, before NASA went silent. She described a message in a bottle traveling through the galaxy, and now as B.A. Elias hides behind the sun, as official channels refuse to release images from the flyby of the Mars asteroid, as amateur astronomers report cylindrical shapes and scientists discover impossible chemical components. That bottle is approaching perihelion, the point of maximum temperature, maximum pressure, the point that, as Avi said, the confessions are suggested if there is a piece of technology the size of a USB drive buried deep in the heart of this comet asteroid. 2910 is when it will reveal itself, or remain forever hidden, and the fact that NASA sent 15,000 staff home just before we could get the best view raises a question that psychics have been asking since August. What have they seen that we are not allowed to see? BA chapter. NASA's silence is eerily ominous. 3/10/2025 is considered a historic day, the day humanity got the closest look at an inter-asteroid visitor at the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, perfectly positioned, high-rise camera, ready to take photos with 30 times higher resolution than anything Hubble could achieve. Mars Express and the ExoTrace gas orbiter, Mars of ESA, were ready with full arrays of instruments then at the exact moment we needed NASA. At least 83% of the agency had disappeared. 15,000 officials on leave vanished into thin air. It must be the most intensive observation campaign in the history of interstellar astronomy. The official explanation is very simple. The federal government shut down. The budget was not approved. It has nothing to do with 3IATLAS. Just an unfortunate timing. Two words that are bearing a lot of responsibility. To explain why the world's leading space agency stopped operating exactly when an object showed 7 impossible points, statistically passing within 29,000 kilometers of our Mars interstellar spacecraft. Think about the probability of that for a moment. BAY-ATLAS was discovered in July, a flyby of Mars. Had been planned for months. Scientists knew this would be their only chance to capture high-resolution images. Before the object disappeared behind the sun, NASA knew ESA, knew every space agency on Earth knew. And in the final week before the closest approach, the U.S. government shut down NASA's official website, stopped updating press releases, ended Team 5. Scientists had to publish data analysis, image processing, and discoveries that had been made at home. Only essential staff remained. A core team of 5 maintained critical operations. But this is what made it suspicious. Raw image feeds from the Perseverance rover continued to be uploaded. The rover kept working. The Mars Interstellar Orbiter kept working. The cameras kept working. Data was still being collected. It just wasn't released to the public. Amateur astronomers, the Dobsonian power. A YouTuber with a solar telescope posted an image on 310 with a simple caption, "What the hell is this?" The image showed something dark. Angular, located in the expected position of BAY-ATLAS. Within hours, the post had thousands of views. People demanded answers. People just said, if a backyard observer could capture this, what are the professional instruments seeing? NASA said nothing. ESA said nothing. The only official confirmation that observations had taken place came from Simeon's mouse. The astrophotographer stacked 20 images from Perseverance and found that faint streak. He posted his work on social media. Not through official channels. A private citizen doing what space agencies would not do. Then came the White House press briefing. Stephen Miller, Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy, was discussing the government shutdown. A reporter asked a question that had been circulating online for days. Had the president been briefed on BAY-ATLAS? The room went silent. Miller paused, chose his words carefully, and dodged the question. The briefing continued. But the question had been asked. The camera in an official setting meant it could no longer be dismissed. As an internet conspiracy theory, the U.S. government was being asked directly about an interstellar object, and they chose not to answer. Meanwhile, Avi Loeb was appearing on news networks. Newsmax, CBS. Podcasts. Anyone willing to listen, he presented anomalies with mathematical precision. Orbital fits to the ecliptic plane. Probability. 0.2% timing optimized for planetary encounters. Probability, 0.05%. 7 features make BAE-ATLAS unlike anything ever observed, and he kept returning to one point. We need data from the Mars Interstellar Orbiter. High-rise images could tell us the diameter of the nucleus. They could resolve structure. They could answer the basic question of what we are looking at. But the images were not released on a podcast. With Brand Keating, Webb mentioned that Representative Tim Burchett, a member of the House Oversight and Accountability Committee, appeared with him on Newsmax to discuss the object. A sitting congressman on national television talking about an interstellar visitor and the suspicious silence around it. This is no longer a fringe discussion. This is entering mainstream political discourse, and NASA still says nothing. The European Space Agency issued a statement confirming that Mars Express and the trace gas orbiter of ExoMars successfully observed BAY-ATLAS. During the flyby window from 1 to 7:10, instruments including high-resolution stereo cameras, color surface imaging systems, and stereo, and many spectrometers collected data. Data will be analyzed in the coming weeks. They said results will be released when ready. But no images, no preliminary findings, no excitement. Any capture of unprecedented views of an interstellar object at the closest distance is merely a dry confirmation that the observations have taken place, followed by silence. China's Tianwen-1 mission said nothing. UAE's Hope orbiter said nothing. All spacecraft at Mars have observed it, and all space agencies on Earth have remained silent. You don't have to be a conspiracy theorist To find this strange, you just need to remember what happened with 2I Borisov. After the previous interstellar comet, when it passed in 2019, images immediately flooded in. Scientists were very excited. Press releases flew rapidly. The astronomy community celebrated. It was treated exactly as you would expect. A rare visitor from outside our solar system, worthy of deep study and public engagement. By contrast, Atlas received silence. The difference perhaps being 2I Borisov behaved exactly like a comet. It had the correct chemical composition, the right tail, the correct outgassing patterns. It was interesting because it came from interstellar space, but it was not unusual. It did not challenge our understanding. It did not raise uncomfortable questions, whereas Atlas did all those things, and so, when it disappeared behind the sun on its way to perihelion, entering the only place in the solar system where no telescope on Earth could see it, the silence grew deeper among astronomers. Amateurs posted their final images. Scientists published their papers carefully worded, technically precise, avoiding speculation. And 15,000 NASA staff waiting to be called back to work wondered what their essential colleagues had seen in the images from the Mars orbiter that the public was not shown. Chapter 4: Impossibilities. There is a principle in science called Occam's razor. When you have competing explanations, the simplest explanation is usually correct. An anomaly can be explained away as coincidence. But when you stack 7 statistical impossibilities together, Occam's razor starts cutting in a different direction. Let me guide you through what makes Atlas unlike anything we have ever tracked through our solar system. Anomaly number 1: mass problem. When astronomers first calculated the size of 3IATLAS, based on its brightness, they got an absurd number, if all that light was just reflected sunlight. The object would have to be somewhere around 102 to 110 kilometers in diameter. For comparison, Oumuamua was less than 100 meters long. 2I Borisov less than 1 kilometer. This seemed to be an order of magnitude larger than statistical models predicted for the number of interstellar objects we should detect, which is very clear. Small objects are common, large objects extremely rare. Presumably, we had found hundreds, perhaps thousands of visitors the size of Oumuamua before accidentally discovering something the size of 3IATLAS. The probability was calculated at about 0.01%, that is 1 in 10,000, but then came astronomical measurement data over 4,000 measurements from 227 observatories, from May to September. As scientists analyzed the object's orbit and compared it with pure gravitational acceleration, they found a remarkable thing: almost no deviation despite very strong outgassing. Despite losing 150 kilos of material per second, the object barely deviated from its expected path. That implies a huge mass, a nucleus so heavy that even continuous gas and dust ejection could not push it off course. Calculations showed a mass over 33 billion tons, diameter greater than 5 kilometers, making it not only larger than previous interstellar visitors, but also larger than Oumuamua by about 1,000 to 1,000 times. Think about that scale. It's like comparing a grain of sand to a boulder, an anomaly. 2 tails pointing towards the sun. The Hubble telescope captured the highest resolution images of 3IATLAS on 21/7/2025. Scientists analyzing those images noticed something never before recorded in any comet. In the solar system, or interstellar, scattered light around the object extended towards the sun about twice as far as when it was perpendicular or opposite the sun. Comets have tails pointing away from the sun because radiation pressure pushes dust particles outward. This is basic physics confirmed by thousands of observations over many centuries. 3IATLAS seemed to violate that principle. This extension was not small. It was a ratio of 10 to 1 over 10 times longer in the sunward direction compared to the horizontal, and this was observed from the side. means the actual elongation is even more extreme when considering the observed geometry by Avi Loeb and Eric Kaiden. Published a paper proposing an explanation related to ice fragments sublimating at different speeds, depending on which side of the object they are ejected from. Physically reasonable and mathematically verified, but it requires a very specific set of conditions, never before observed in any other comet, a unique configuration coincidentally occurring in one interstellar visitor. Interstellar comets have shown many other anomalies. The BA fingerprint anomaly in late August and early September. The Very Large Telescope in Chile pointed its UVES spectrograph at 3IATLAS and discovered one thing: that stunned scientists' nickel atoms in the ejected gas greatly increased exponentially as the object approached the Sun, increasing according to a power law of about 9. But here is the problem: they almost did not detect iron naturally. Nickel and iron are produced together in supernova explosions. They appear in nearly fixed ratios. Every natural comet ever observed shows nickel and iron with similar abundances. 2I Borisov. Previous interstellar comets had normal nickel-iron ratios. Every comet in the solar system has normal ratios. 3IATLAS is producing nickel without iron. The only place we see that signature is in industrial production of nickel alloys, materials that have been refined and separated intentionally. The scientists publishing this data were very careful in their wording. They called it extremely puzzling. They noted that the temperature at the object's distance from the Sun is too low to cause evaporation. Refractory minerals contain these metals under normal conditions. They proposed some chemical pathways that might explain it. But you can sense the uncertainty in the text. Anomaly? 4. Polarization from another world. When light scatters off particles, it becomes polarized. The degree and direction of polarization tell you about the size, shape, and composition of those particles. Comets have characteristic polarization signatures. We have measured hundreds of them. The patterns are well understood. 3IATLAS shows a polarization signature not existing in any category. Minus 2.77% at a phase angle of about 7 degrees, a reversal angle of only 17 degrees. This combination has never been measured in any asteroid or comet in the solar system or beyond. The closest similarity is not a comet, but trans-Neptunian objects, and a specific centaur named Pholus. These are icy bodies from the distant regions of the solar system, with very different composition and history compared to ordinary comets. A paper submitted to the Astrophysical Journal Letters concluded that 3IATLAS may represent a distinct type of comet, expanding the diversity of known interstellar objects. A distinct type is scientific language for saying we have no category for this. Anomaly 5. Alignment with the ecliptic plane. The solar system is basically flat with planets orbiting on a plane. Called the ecliptic plane. Random interstellar objects come from random directions, crossing that plane at random angles. The probability that an interstellar visitor's orbit lies within 5 degrees of the ecliptic plane is about 0.2%. 1 in 500, 3IATLAS arrived and aligned within 5 degrees. Not only that, it moves retrograde, opposite to the direction planets orbit. This is the ideal orbit if you want to survey many planets with minimal course adjustment. Anomaly 6. Planetary encounters. 3IATLAS will pass near 8 planets during its flyby. After perihelion at 0.65 astronomical units, Mars at 0.19 AU, Jupiter at 0.36 AU. The probability for a random interstellar visitor to arrive with timing, allowing close approaches to 8 different planets, is about 0.05%, 1 in 20,000. If you are designing a reconnaissance mission to our solar system, this is the orbit you would choose. Anomaly 7. Signal coincidence. Wow. In 1977, the Big Ear radio telescope detected a signal so strange that astronomer Jerry Eman wrote "wow" in the margin of the printout. It came from the Sagittarius constellation. Lasted 72 seconds. and was never detected again despite searches over many decades. When scientists traced 3IATLAS's orbit through the galaxy, considering its speed and direction, they calculated where it would be in 1977. The answer is within 9 degrees of the origin of the WOW signal. The probability of this alignment is about 0.6%, statistically unusual, and we are asked to believe that all of them are coincidences around 2910. Confession now as you listen to this. Bay. Atlas is somewhere we cannot see hidden behind the sun, moving towards a point in space where physics becomes ruthless and honest, the perihelion point. The closest approach to our star for BAY-Atlas that moment will come on 29/10/2025, at a distance of about 1.44 astronomical units just inside the orbit of Mars, close enough that the sun is no longer a distant light source but becomes an overwhelming presence. Imagine you are standing in front of an open blast furnace. Now multiply that heat by a factor you cannot imagine. That is the significance of the perihelion point for an object. Coming from the cold darkness of interstellar space, sunlight shines on the surface with gigawatts of energy. Not metaphorical energy, but watts that can be actually measured, the kind of energy powering cities. Avi Loeb made a remark that impressed many people. High-pressure environments will elicit confessions. He was talking about interrogation tactics. But this principle also applies to physics. When you heat ice, it cannot pretend to be anything other than ice. When you heat rock, it behaves like rock, and when you heat something pretending to be a comet, but might be something completely different, the mask will fall off. There are 2 scenarios for what happens at perihelion, and they could not be more different. Scenario 1. BAY-Atlas is exactly what it seems, a comet with unusual mass and strange chemistry. Statistically unlikely, but still natural in this scenario. 2910 marks the start of spectacular activity. Surface temperature rises. Volatiles that have been dormant for billions of years suddenly find themselves immersed in solar radiation. Carbon dioxide sublimates water, turns to vapor dust. Particles rise into giant plumes. We have seen this happen before. Comets near perihelion become magnificent. They develop tails millions of kilometers long. They glow spectacularly. Sometimes they break apart under pressure, shattering into fragments that scatter violently, chaotic, and utterly beautiful. If BAY-Atlas is natural, we will see something similar. A big outburst of gas and dust. Brightness increases tenfold or more the development of a proper tail, not a sunward anomaly light, but a classic comet tail stretching behind it as radiation pressure does its work. And if this object is fragile, like a number of scientists suspect, if that 5-kilometer diameter is mainly loosely bound ice rather than solid rock, perihelion could tear it apart completely. We could watch in real time as an interstellar visitor disintegrates into fragments, giving us an unprecedented view of the internal structure of a comet. From another star system that would be extraordinary. It would answer questions about comet formation, about the composition of planetary systems beyond our solar system, about processes ejecting objects into interstellar space. That would be a scientific goldmine, even if it destroys the object we are studying. But then there is scenario 2. BAY-Atlas is not natural. The anomalies are not coincidences. Nickel, no iron, the reverse tail. Perfect alignment with the ecliptic plane and the origin of the WOW signal. They are meaningful in this scenario. Perihelion is not about sublimation, it is about activation. Think about what you would do. If you were sending a probe to another star system, you would need it to survive a journey of billions of years in the cold. Radiation VA impact, slow decay of time encasing it in ice, makes perfect sense. Ice is common, it provides protection. It makes the probe look natural to any civilization that might detect it before it is ready to be noticed. But once that probe reaches the solar system inside, once it approaches its host star, it needs to wake up. It needs energy. And there is only one energy source available, the star itself. Perihelion, in this scenario, is not a stress test. It is a charging station. Webb has outlined the possibilities in his papers. With mathematical precision, an object can use a maneuver to glide around the sun. This is a practical technique used by our spacecraft. You approach close to the sun, using its gravitational force to accelerate, and dramatically change your trajectory with minimal fuel consumption. This is the most efficient way to change direction within the solar system. The optimal point for this maneuver is at perihelion, and ExoMars reaches perihelion when it is completely obscured from observation from Earth, hidden behind the sun if it wants to change course without being detected. This will be the time, or it can release something mini-probes, small spacecraft detach, and use a retrograde orbit to intercept planets. Mars, Earth, Jupiter, all can be reached from this position, with minimal course adjustment. The timing of planetary alignments makes this easy, almost trivial compared to random arrival times. Loeb has carefully noted the implications. If 3IATLAS is directed towards Earth when it reappears on the other side of the sun, the financial markets could collapse. This is not exaggeration. It is a sober assessment of what happens when humanity realizes it is not alone. And the visitors may not be friendly, but we will not know not yet because from now until early December, we are blind. All telescopes on Earth, all space observatories cannot see behind the sun's orbit. ExoMars is in a perfect communication blackout for a spacecraft that does not want to advertise its next move. The European Space Agency has a contingency plan from 2 to 25th of November. The Jupiter Icy Moons Explorer spacecraft currently en route to Jupiter will point its instruments towards 3IATLAS. JUICE will catch the object just after perihelion when it should be at peak activity, when whatever is about to happen has happened. JUICE is not designed to study comets. Its cameras and spectrometers are optimized for icy moons to detect subsurface oceans, to analyze the chemistry of extraterrestrial water. But those same instruments can look at 3IATLAS, and because JUICE is between Earth and the Sun, it has a viewpoint we do not have from our planet. If the object develops a coma and a giant tail, JUICE will see it. If it breaks up, JUICE will record the debris field, and if it does something unexpected, if it maneuvers or releases objects or exhibits any behavior inconsistent with a natural comet, JUICE will also record that. The data will not be immediate. Space communication takes time. And JUICE is far from home, but by late November, early December, we will have the answer. At the same time, 3IATLAS will reappear in Earth's view. 1910-2 is when the object approaches closest to our planet. Still 1.8 astronomical units away. No threat yet, but close enough for all major observatories to track. Close enough for us to track its orbit with extreme precision. And that is when we will know if anything has changed. If the orbit is exactly as predicted by gravitational models, we can breathe a sigh of relief. Another strange interstellar visitor, but natural, passing through on its way back to the darkness of space. But if the numbers deviate, if the orbit shows even small deviations that cannot be explained by outgassing or solar radiation pressure, then every assumption we have made about our place in the universe will need to be reconsidered. 29-10 is the day 3IATLAS confesses what it really is. Except we will not hear that confession until December, and by then it may be too late to do anything other than watch what happens next. Chapter 6. Global Panic. While scientists debate the data and NASA maintains silence, something else is happening. Something spreading faster than any peer-reviewed scientific paper could. The internet is ablaze. It started in the US as these things often do. TikTok videos showing images claimed to be of 3IATLAS. Some real, most fake, all accumulating millions of views. Topics on Reddit spread into thousands of comments. Twitter, or X as it is now called, has become a battleground between amateur astronomers posting legitimate observations and influencers chasing engagement with increasingly wild claims. But the U.S. was only the beginning. In India, the story transformed into something completely different. WhatsApp, the main communication tool for hundreds of millions of people, became a medium for spreading rumors that spread faster than fact-checkers could respond. Forwarded messages in Hindi described an alien ship disguised. Videos narrated with an urgent voice claimed the object was changing course. Screenshots of fake articles with headlines designed to cause panic. A particularly viral forwarded message claimed that world governments were negotiating with any AI or whatever on 3IATLAS. Another message suggested that military forces were being secretly mobilized. A third message showed an edited image purportedly from NASA, stamped top secret, showing a geometric structure where there should have been a comet. None of it was true. All of it kept spreading. Hindi YouTube channels exploded with content. Some were serious efforts in science communication explaining what an interstellar object really was. Other channels leaned heavily towards speculation, mixing legitimate astronomical events with ancient astronaut theories and prophecies. The line between education and entertainment blurred until it disappeared completely. Brazil witnessed a similar movement unfolding. On Telegram and Facebook, UFO enthusiast communities already ready to see patterns in the sky were operating at full capacity. Groups that had spent years analyzing lights over the Amazon now had something concrete to analyze. An actual object from interstellar space exhibiting behaviors even scientists called puzzling. Brazil's conspiracy ecosystem is unique and vibrant. It blends indigenous mythology, mysticism, Catholicism, and modern UFO lore into something challenging. Easy classification. 3IATLAS became everything to everyone, a harbinger of the apocalypse. A ship of enlightened beings coming to save humanity from itself. A weapon, a gift, a challenge. Facebook groups swelled with new members, live streams discussing the object, lasting for hours. Hosts read scientific articles aloud, then immediately switched to speculation, going far beyond what those articles claimed. Comment sections were digital campfires where thousands gathered to share fears, and theories in equal measure. The UK, with its long history of crop circles and Ministry of Defense UFO investigations, approached 3IATLAS with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. British tabloids ran headlines, walking a careful line between sensationalism and plausible deniability. A giant comet could be alien technology. Scientists mentioned were often Avi Loeb quoted out of context. But the headlines did their job. Predictably, Russia viewed the entire affair through a geopolitical lens. State media referred to the object casually, always carefully noting U.S. uncertainty and confusion. Some suggested Western powers were manufacturing a crisis to justify increased military spending. Others darkly hinted that the U.S. government knew more than it said. Perhaps even U.S. black budget programs had made contact. Russian forums exploded with technical discussions, often impressively knowledgeable about astronomy. But mixed with legitimate science were suggestions that 3IATLAS was linked to secret space programs, recovered alien technology, ancient conspiracies dating back to the Soviet era. Then came the Michio Kaku incident. A screenshot began circulating showing the theoretical physicist in a TV interview with overlaid text claiming he said that 3IATLAS was on a reconnaissance mission, possibly with hostile intent. The caption read, "It might be an alien probe sent to Earth." The image was real. The context was not. Fact-checkers traced the screenshot back to a Nation News interview. From 2025, many months before the 3IATLAS object was discovered, Kaku had discussed a completely different topic, likely an asteroid impact scenario. From 2025, many months before the ExoMars article was discovered, Kaku had discussed a completely different topic, possibly a VA asteroid impact scenario. That AI took his image, added fake text, and released it, Besides being fake, it was unimportant. The post accumulated over 290,000 views before platforms began flagging it. By then, it had been screenshotted and reshared countless times, each iteration harder to trace back. Again, the fabrication. The Loeb account that posted it never issued a correction. Damage was done. Thousands now believe that a respected physicist confirmed 3IATLAS as hostile alien technology. NASA tried to respond. Their official solar system account posted on 39 Comet 3IATLAS poses no threat to Earth. It will be hundreds of millions of kilometers away from our planet. This is a natural interstellar object. Extremely rare and scientifically valuable, but not dangerous. The reaction was immediate and skeptical if it was just a comet. The interstellar community shut down. If it is not dangerous, the interstellar community is silent. If it is natural, explain the lack of iron in Nike. NASA did not participate further, standing alone against a tsunami of speculation. The fact-checking agency of Azazera Sanat announced a thorough investigation. They confirmed that 3IATLAS is real, discovered by the Atlas telescope on 1/7/2025. They confirmed it poses no threat with its closest approach to Earth, about 270,000 kilometers away. They exposed Kaku's citations, military mobilization claims, secret negotiation rumors. Their fact-checking is solid journalism. It probably changed very little thinking because while Sanat was verifying the truth, Avi Loeb was speaking unofficially at the United Nations, not in the General Assembly, but in conversations with delegates. In documents circulated among policy advisors in closed meetings where the term was used without irony, he presented his black swan event scenario, the idea that low probability, high-impact events require preparation especially when we think they are unlikely to happen. A black swan is something that seems impossible until it happens. Then it seems obvious in hindsight. This concept was developed by Nassim Taleb to explain financial crises, but Taleb applied it to interstellar guests, assuming all are natural, because we only see the natural ones. But what happens when that assumption breaks down? The harbinger's omens begin trending, not in mainstream feeds but in specific communities obsessively following 3IATLAS. The term comes from ancient texts, from prophetic words describing messengers from the sky, omens of change, judgment, transformation. Some understand it literally. Theology of the end times surprisingly matching an interstellar object exhibiting impossible characteristics. Others use it metaphorically, an omen of a new space age, of humanity's awakening. Before a universe more crowded than we imagined, and through all the panic, speculation, and wild theories, one voice continues to appear in the discourse. Stephen Burns, the cosmologist Moneypenny mentioned, claims spread that he believes 3IATLAS is intelligent, that it shows consciousness, that it has been communicating with us and other planets. No AI can find where Burns actually said this. No article was published, no interview given, only indirect reports, and cryptic social media posts. But the idea took root because it fit too well with everything else happening. Anomalies. Silence, the feeling that something is happening just beyond our clear sight. Chapter 7. Judgment of early December 2025. 3IATLAS will appear from behind the sun like a swimmer surfacing after a long dive. Astronomers will find it in the low Virgo constellation on the eastern horizon in the hours before dawn. Brightness, magnitude 12 or 13. Still too faint for amateur telescopes but well within reach of professional observatories. And everyone will follow the numbers. Orbital mechanics is one of the most precise sciences we have. Newton's laws refined by Einstein's relativity allow us to predict where an object will be years in advance. Accurate to the kilometer, we can account for gravitational perturbations from planets, radiation pressure from sunlight, even the subtle thrust of Outgassing when the comet emits material. When BAI-ATLAS reappears at its position, it will tell a story. If it is exactly where pure gravitational calculations say it should be, plus or minus the expected deviation from outgassing, then we can reasonably conclude that nothing unusual happened during its time behind the Sun. It passed the perihelion point, surviving the heat, and continued on its predetermined path into the outer solar system and eventually back into interstellar space. But if the position is off, if the orbit shows changes that cannot be explained by known forces, then every paper written about this object will need an addendum. Every theory will be broken because objects do not change direction by themselves. Something must push them to observe. Vera. Rubin will play an important role in what happens next. This telescope has only recently become operational, representing a revolution in how we survey the sky. Previous asteroid surveys found about 20,000 new objects each year. Rubin found 2,140 asteroids in the first 10 hours of operation. 10 hours, 2,000 asteroids. The implications are astonishing. When Rubin shifted her focus to searching for interstellar objects, the trickle will become a flood. Scientists estimate we could detect dozens of interstellar visitors each year instead of just a few every several years. And each one will be studied with lessons drawn from BAI-ATLAS still fresh in our minds. We will know what to look for: chemical signatures, polarization characteristics, orbital alignments. If BAI-ATLAS is truly unusual, we will have other objects to compare it with, if it is the first of a new kind. Rubin will find its siblings, but December is not just about orbital mechanics and future surveys. It is about questions raised since July. What have the Mars orbiters really seen by December? The government shutdown will be long over. ESA will be back fully staffed. The high-rise images from 310 will have been processed, analyzed, and either archived or prepared for release. Those images were taken when BAI-ATLAS was only 29,000 kilometers from the camera, able to resolve features on the nucleus. If the coma is not too dense, a 5-quart-wide object at that distance will show structure, not fine detail. But the overall shape, whether round, elongated, or irregular brightness differences, indicate different materials on the surface, not, does it look like other comet nuclei we have photographed? Or is it something else? The fact these images have not been released raises questions that will not disappear, just because the calendar turns to December. Scientific data is usually released as quickly as possible. The competition to be first with new discoveries is fierce. Many space agencies observing BAI-ATLAS at Mars, and no agency releasing detailed images, suggests either a great silent coordination, which seems unlikely, or what they see requires careful consideration. Before release, December will force a resolution to this silence. Either the images appear confirming it is just an unusual comet, or the absence of images becomes its own answer. Radio. Astronomers will also monitor connections with the WOW signal. Either coincidence or not, if BAI-ATLAS is the source in 1977, and if it still can transmit signals, December provides another opportunity to detect something. Many radio telescopes have quietly monitored the area where BAI-ATLAS should be, not with the fanfare of usual SETI campaigns, but with steady patient observation. Any signal, any pulse, any pattern in radio frequencies correlated with the object's position would be revolutionary. The hydrogen line at 1420 MHz is the frequency to watch. That is where the WOW signal appeared. That is where any civilization trying to be heard would broadcast. Because hydrogen is the most common element in the universe and its spectral line is a universal constant. If BAI-ATLAS has something to say, that is where it will say it. 1910. 2 marks the closest approach to Earth, 1.8 astronomical units. About 270,000 kilometers for comparison, that is about 1.5 times the distance from Earth to the Sun. About 270,000 kilometers. For comparison, that is about 1.5 times the distance from Earth to the Sun. Not close by any important safety measure, but close enough for parallax to become significant. Parallax is the apparent shift in the position of an object when viewed from different locations as Earth orbits the Sun. Our viewpoint of 3IATLAS changes slightly. By measuring the shift with extremely high precision, we can triangulate the distance and the exact velocity of the object. Any deviation from expected values becomes immediately apparent. Observatories worldwide will coordinate observations of the northern and southern hemispheres at different longitudes. Providing continuous day and night coverage, amateur astronomers will contribute data alongside experts. This will be one of the most meticulously recorded observations of any object in the solar system in history. And somewhere within all that data, we will find either confirmation or contradiction. The confirmation that despite everything, this is a natural object from interstellar space, exhibiting rare but explainable characteristics. An ambassador from another planetary system strange because it formed under different conditions than the stars. Comets of our solar system but ultimately still obeying the same physics. Or the contradiction, something in its orbit chemistry or behavior irreconcilable with a natural origin. A data point breaking the pattern, compelling us to consider what we have avoided considering. By the end of December, 3IATLAS will fade again as it recedes from the Sun, moving into the Leo constellation, heading back towards Jupiter's orbit, where it will pass in March 2026. Then the outer solar system is interstellar space. Either way, December will give us answers, not all the answers, but enough to know whether we are witnessing the greatest cometary display of our generation or the greatest upheaval in human understanding, since we realized Earth is not the center of the universe. Telescopes are ready, equations prepared. The world is watching. Now we wait for 3IATLAS to appear from behind the Sun and show us what it really is. Chapter 8. The scientifically impossible. Let me take you deeper into the science that keeps astronomers awake at night. This is not speculation nor theory, but actual measurements utterly unreasonable, no matter how many times you calculate the numbers. Starting with the WOW signal on 15/8/1977. The Big Ear radio telescope at Ohio State University was conducting a routine sky survey when it detected something that shouldn't exist. A narrowband signal at 1424 MHz, exactly where you would expect an artificial transmission. It lasted 72 seconds. The exact time the telescope's beam would sweep across a stationary source as the Earth rotated. The signal was very strong, over 30 times louder than the background noise on the printout. Intensity values rose from the normal level of 1 and 2. Up to 5 and 6, peaking at the letter U, the highest value the system could print before running out of alphanumeric characters. Astronomer Jerry Eman saw those values rise and wrote the word WOW in the margin of the printout. They searched for it again for many years, many decades. Bigger telescopes pointed at the same patch of sky hundreds of times. Other observatories joined the search. Nothing. No signal, never repeated. Over time, it became astronomy's most famous mystery. Evidence of nothing proving nothing. But impossible to forget now. Trace 3IATLAS in space at a velocity of 60 km per second. Mapping its orbit through the galaxy in 1977, it was about 600 astronomical units from Earth. That is 600 times the distance from Earth to the Sun, about 90 billion kilometers at that distance. To produce a signal as strong as what Big Ear detected would require a transmitter, with power from 0.5 gigawatt to 2 gigawatts. That is not a battery, that is not a generator. It is a nuclear reactor with sustained power focused into a beam narrow enough to reach 90 billion kilometers, and still be recorded over 30 times above background noise. Can a comet do that? No, not by any physical law we understand. Comets do not generate gigawatt energy. They do not emit coherent radio signals. They do not broadcast at exact frequencies, which coincidentally are universal markers for technological civilizations searching for each other, but an object designed to be found. An object needing to announce its presence before entering the inner solar system would broadcast precisely in this way. A power strong enough to be unmistakable is followed by silence, because you would not want to reveal your location until you are ready. Now, Let's move on to the chemistry of data from the Very Large Telescope showing nickel without iron in nature. These two elements have been linked since birth when a massive star explodes in a supernova, creating heavy elements in that furnace. Nickel-56 decays into iron-56. They are produced in the same nuclear processes bound within the same minerals, released into space as an inseparable pair. Every meteorite, every asteroid, every comet ever analyzed shows they go together. The ratio varies slightly depending on the environment, but they are always present together. Borisov's two slashes come from interstellar space just like BAI-ATLAS showed normal nickel-iron ratios in comets in the solar system. Also, showing normal ratios. No natural process at the temperatures BAI-ATLAS experienced can separate these elements, but refining can be done by metallurgy, chemical processing, industrial alloy production. Nickel requires the removal of iron impurities. We do this on Earth every day. High-purity nickel is used for electronics, for specialized alloys and applications where iron would interfere. This process leaves a signature, nickel without iron. Scientists published this data from the Very Large Telescope. They tried every natural explanation they could imagine. Perhaps unusual chemical pathways in ice, perhaps strange minerals formed under conditions never seen before. Perhaps dust particle physics we do not fully understand. Every hypothesis hits the same wall temperature too low. Environment unsuitable. This should not happen, and it is not static. Nickel production increases exponentially as the distance to the sun decreases. According to a power law of about 9, meaning every time the object moves 10% closer, nickel production increases by a rapidly rising factor. This is not random outgassing. This is an accelerating process as solar energy increases. Almost like something being switched on, then the tail just points the wrong way, the tail opposing the sun. It broke one of the simplest and most reliable rules in planetary science. Solar radiation pressure is not subtle. When photons from the sun hit dust particles, they transfer momentum, a small but continuous push over time. It overcomes the weak gravity of the comet and pushes dust particles away from the sun. Every comet ever photographed shows this. The tail always points away from the sun. Always. Except by Atlas shows scattered light extending towards the sun. Twice as far as the opposite direction. Hubble's image is unmistakable. Enhanced data makes it even clearer. There is more material on the sun-facing side than on the opposite side. Avi Loeb and Eric Caden published a model suggesting this could happen if the object releases large ice fragments from the side opposite the sun, and those fragments last longer because they are larger, creating a snow trail extending sunwards. This physics works in theory. Ice fragments of specific size are ejected at specific velocities under specific solar heating conditions. But those conditions are extremely narrow. You need preferential ejection from the day side. You need fragments large enough to resist radiation pressure, but small enough to scatter visible light effectively. You need moderate evaporation rates so the fragments last long enough to create the observed distribution. That can happen, but it is very difficult. Similar to flipping a coin 50 times and getting heads every time. Physics does not forbid it. But the probability makes you wonder if the coin is rigged. And this is the pattern. Every anomaly has a natural explanation that can work if you are willing to accept that the Atlas comet is uniquely configured in ways no comet has ever been. Mass can be explained if it is unusually dense. Orbit can be explained if statistical luck occurs. Course can be explained if strange processes are occurring. Polarization can be explained. If the dust distribution is unlike anything recorded before, every explanation is reasonable when considered alone. But they are not isolated. They accumulate on top of each other. 7. Anomalies each demanding a special justification of its own. all happening within the same object to the point where the simplest explanation is no longer natural, but begins to be designed. That is the question scientists are struggling with as the EATLAS and Min flies past the Sun on 1/10/2025. Something flew past within 250 miles of Earth at an altitude where astronauts live and work on the International Space Station. Commercial satellites orbit along carefully tracked paths, but this object, asteroid 2025 TF, was completely untracked. We detected it 6 hours after it had rushed past us at a speed of over 13,000 miles per hour just above the South Pole. Think about that for a moment. A space rock the size of a small car, moving faster than any bullet, passed right through the airspace where humanity conducts its most advanced activities. And we had no idea it was coming. Meanwhile, on Mars, our rovers have found what scientists call the clearest sign of ancient life we have ever discovered. Fossilized flower spots frozen in time that could prove we have never been alone. Congressional hearings have just revealed footage of a military missile striking an unidentified object off the coast of Yemen. And that object did not explode. It kept flying. The Sun is entering a phase physicists call the final jerk, which could light up our skies with auroras more intense than anything we have seen in many decades. A Comet is rushing towards us right now, turning blue 6 as they approach, and one of them could become visible to the naked eye. In the coming weeks, NASA has furloughed 15,000 staff while racing China to the moon. And a private company is about to launch the most powerful rocket ever built in what could be its final test, before being completely redesigned. This is not science fiction. This is 10/2025 if you are ready to dive deep into what is really happening above our heads right now. Hit like and subscribe because we are about to spend the next 2 hours exploring the most extraordinary space news of our generation. Let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is there, and which story shocks you the most. And if you want to help our community grow, please share this video on X, Facebook, Reddit, or your favorite messaging app. Thanks for always supporting us. Let's start with the asteroid that slipped through our defenses. Chapter 9. Close Encounter. The asteroid sneaked close to humanity. We have spent billions building a planetary defense system, telescopes and radar all over the Earth, constantly scanning the night sky, cataloging every moving object, calculating orbits, ensuring nothing dangerous approaches without warning. The system works effectively, especially for large asteroids, the kind that could wipe out cities, or even entire civilizations. We track them months or years ahead, but on 1/10/2025, our entire detection network failed to spot something until it was in our rearview mirror. Asteroid 2025 TF is between 1.2 and 2.7 meters in diameter. Not exactly a planet killer, but about the size of a small car. It was moving at 20.9 kilometers per second. That's nearly 13,000 miles per hour, fast enough to cross the U.S. in less than 4 minutes. At its closest approach just after midnight, UTC on 1/10, this rock passed at an altitude of 408 kilometers above the South Pole. To put it in perspective, the International Space Station orbits at about 420 kilometers. The asteroid flew through the same area where astronauts sleep. The Catalina Sky Survey in Arizona detected it at 02:35 Eastern Time on 1/10 using the Biokey telescope at the Kitpic National Observatory. But here's what will keep you awake at night. That detection happened 6 hours and 36 minutes after the asteroid's closest approach. We did not see it coming. We saw it leaving. Currently, asteroid 2025 TF is ranked as the second closest recorded flyby asteroid. The record holder is asteroid 2010 VT4. Flew even closer in October 2020, coming within 380 meters of the Earth's surface, but we only detected it after it had passed. There is a pattern here, and it is not a pleasant one. The issue is not the incompetence of astronomers and engineers operating these detection systems, who are among the best in the world. The problem lies in physics and resources. Small asteroids like 2025 TF are extremely difficult to detect. They are fast and do not reflect much sunlight. Our telescope networks are optimized to catch the big ones. Asteroids larger than 110 meters can cause regional destruction. Those we monitor strictly, but objects between 1 and 10 meters number in the millions and are almost invisible until they are right above us. This is when things get more interesting. When asteroid 2025 TF was finally detected, scientists had to work backwards to calculate its orbit. They determined it follows an elongated path around the Sun, with a semi-major axis of 1.62 astronomical units. Its orbit brings it closest at 0.676 astronomical units from the Sun at perihelion and farthest at 256 astronomical units at aphelion. The orbital period is about 2.06 years, and the orbit is inclined about 9.1 degrees to the ecliptic plane, the flat disk where most planets orbit, but all those numbers come with great uncertainty. This orbit is what astronomers call poorly determined with a condition code of 7, meaning the calculations are based on an observation arc, lasting 1 day, a snapshot so brief that predicting where this asteroid will be in the future is more guesswork than science. Additional observations will be required to refine its orbit and assess whether it could pose any threat in future encounters with Earth. Consider the implications of this. An object passed closer to Earth than some of our satellites, and we only have the vaguest idea where it came from, or where it will go next. It could return. It could be on a collision course with Earth in the next several decades, or it might never come close again. We simply do not know. The uncomfortable truth is that asteroids of this size hit Earth more often than most people realize. The Tunguska event in 1908 flattened 830 square miles of Siberian forest, likely caused by an object only about 30 to 50 meters wide. That is larger than 2025 TF, but not by a huge margin. If 2025 TF had been on a collision course, rather than a flyby orbit, it would have exploded in the atmosphere with the force of several kilotons of TNT. Not enough to end civilization, but certainly enough to devastate a city if it happened to explode over one inch, and we would not have known it was coming until it was too late. Scientists are calling this a wake-up call. The near miss has sparked discussions about improving our detection capabilities for smaller near-Earth objects, because if there is one thing this encounter clarified, it is that our cosmic neighborhood is busy, and far more dangerous than what our current systems can fully monitor. The question is not whether another asteroid will surprise us. The question is when, and whether we will be lucky enough for it to miss again. But while we worry about rocks flying past Earth, something much more profound has happened on the surface of Mars. Something that could answer one of humanity's oldest questions. Chapter 10. Breakthrough on Mars. Undeniable evidence of ancient life. For over a year, a rock on Mars has kept scientists awake, not because of its unusual size or composition, but because of what is written on its surface. The markings that on Earth would be unmistakable signs of life. On 10/9/2025, NASA issued a shocking announcement to the scientific community and beyond. The discovery by the Perseverance rover of potential biosignatures in a sample called Sapphire Canyon has passed the most rigorous scientific scrutiny imaginable, peer-reviewed and published in the journal Nature. NASA Administrator Saddafi stated bluntly, "This is very likely the clearest sign of life that we have ever found on Mars." Let's go back to 24/7/2024. When Perseverance drilled into an arrow-shaped rock nicknamed Chayava Falls in the Jezero crater on Mars. The rover's instruments immediately detected something fascinating. The rock surface was covered by what scientists began to call flower spots, small circular features with a brighter center surrounded by dark rings. These are not just beautiful flower-like patterns. They are chemical signs that on Earth are usually created by microbes, consuming organic matter and producing specific minerals as waste. These spots contain vivianite and bregorite, Two minerals formed in low-temperature, water-rich environments. Vivianite is a hydrated iron phosphate commonly found near organic matter and decomposing sediments. Breggerite is an iron sulfate that some microbial life forms produce as a byproduct of their metabolic processes finding these minerals together. Alongside organic carbon creates what geologists call a compelling potential biosignature. But this is where the story gets even more interesting. An ancient river valley once carried water into the Jezero crater over 3 billion years ago. This valley, about 1/4 of a mile wide, shows evidence of strong, long-lasting water flow. The layered mudstone and sediment at Bright Angel tell the story of a dynamic environment where swift rivers alternated with periods of still water. Exactly the kind of environment where microbial life thrives here on Earth. This discovery is particularly surprising because Bright Angel represents some of the youngest sedimentary rocks that the Perseverance mission has investigated. Previous hypotheses suggested that signs of ancient life would be limited to older rock strata, relics from Mars' earliest and most habitable era, but finding these features in relatively younger rocks suggests Mars may have sustained life for a longer period than previously thought, or that life tried to persist later in the planet's history than we imagined. Now, before we get too excited, we need to talk about the real significance of a potential biosignature. This is not proof of life. It is evidence that requires further investigation. As mission scientist Katie Stack Morgan emphasized, claims about astrobiology, especially those related to the potential discovery of past extraterrestrial life, require extraordinary evidence, the peer review process leading to publication in the journal. Nature was deliberately rigorous, with outside scientists spending a whole year thoroughly reviewing the Mars 2020 team's data and analyses. They sought alternative explanations, abiotic processes, that could produce similar patterns, and while they found some possibilities, none matched the evidence, as well as the biological hypothesis. This is what makes this discovery so powerful. The Perseverance rover used two sophisticated instruments to analyze Chayava Falls Sherlock, short for scanning habitable environments with Raman, and luminescence for organics and chemicals, detected a strong spectral signal called Ben, indicating organic carbon pixels. The planetary instrument for X-ray lithochemistry mapped the distribution of chemical elements on the rock surface with astonishing precision. Together, these instruments revealed that organic matter and redox-sensitive minerals were not only present, they coexisted in the same tiny spots, clustered together in a way strongly suggestive of a link on Earth. This kind of coexistence occurs all the time in microbial environments. Microbes consume organic compounds and release minerals. As waste, these minerals precipitate right where the microbes live, creating distinctive patterns. The flower spots on Chayava Falls look very similar to features found in ancient terrestrial rocks, where we know microbial activity occurred, but there is an obstacle, and it is a major obstacle to actually confirm whether these features are biological in origin. Scientists need to bring the Chayava Falls sample back to Earth, where it can be analyzed with much more sophisticated tools than anything we can send to Mars. Laboratories here can perform isotopic analyses, examine the molecular structure of organic compounds, and conduct experiments simply not possible with the current toolkit. The limitation of a rover is where political drama enters the story of the Mars sample return mission, a joint effort between NASA and the European Space Agency designed to do exactly this: retrieving the samples that Perseverance has carefully collected and delivering them to laboratories on Earth. But the mission has been affected by budget overruns and delays, with President Trump's proposed 2026 budget set to completely cancel the current Mars sample return program, cutting all its funding. In the September briefing announcing findings about Chayava Falls, Duffy said this is not an abandonment of the goal, but a strategic redirection to seek a cheaper, faster option. Meanwhile, China has announced plans for its own Mars sample return mission, potentially launching as early as 2028 if the U.S. does not bring back Perseverance's samples. China could be the first to return Martian material to Earth and may be the definitive answer. as to whether life ever existed on Mars. The geopolitical implications are staggering. Currently, the Sapphire Canyon sample lies safely sealed in a tube on the surface of Mars, waiting. It contains what could be the most important scientific discovery in human history, frozen evidence that could rewrite our understanding of life's place in the universe. But while that sample waits, something else is happening much closer to home, something forcing governments to face questions they would rather not answer. Chapter 11. The Deepening UFO Mystery. Congress revealed shocking footage on 9/9/2025. Representative Eric Burleson from Missouri entered a House Oversight Committee hearing and played a video never before seen by the public. The footage, dated 30/10/2024, shows a bright spherical object moving against a dark background. Then, suddenly, a Hellfire missile enters the frame. The missile directly strikes the object. What happens next challenges everything we think. We know about how missiles work. The object does not explode. It does not break apart. It doesn't even seem to slow down. The missile appears to bounce off and continues on its own trajectory while the sphere keeps flying. That is a Hellfire missile hitting a UFO and it just bounces off, Berlin said, commenting on the video. And it keeps going. He stopped, then asked the question that has echoed in defense circles ever since. I won't speculate what it is, but the question is, why are we consistently blocked from this information? The video was recorded by an MQ-9 Reaper drone, operating off the coast of Yemen at the time. The waters near Yemen were an active conflict zone, with U.S. Navy ships and aircraft protecting commercial shipping lanes from missiles and drones fired by Houthi militants. U.S. forces regularly shot down threats in that area, but this object, whatever it was, did not behave like a drone or a missile, and certainly did not respond to a Hellfire attack the way any known aircraft would. When asked to verify the video and provide details on the time and place it was recorded, the Department of Defense offered no comment. A defense official told reporters, "We have nothing to offer on this matter." A Department of Defense spokesperson added, "I have nothing for you. The cover-up only deepens the mystery." But the Yemen video was not the only revelation at the hearing. Many veterans testified under oath about their own encounters with unidentified anomalous phenomena. The government's current term for what was once called UFOs, Air Force veteran Dylan Boland described an incident from 2012 when he stepped outside for a smoke during an overnight shift at Langley Air Force Base in Virginia. A triangular-shaped aircraft hovered silently and motionless above him for several minutes. Then, according to Boland, the object quickly ascended to the altitude of commercial jets and left the area at high speed. Boland reported the incident through official channels. He was interviewed by the Pentagon's AARO office in 2023. But instead of being taken seriously, he claims his report was dismissed. Worse, he says, he faced retaliation at work. His security clearance was manipulated, and he was blacklisted. Not allowed to work at federal intelligence agencies, his testimony paints a picture of a system not only failing in investigating UAP encounters, but also actively punishing those who dare to speak out. The hearing is not just about individual sightings, it is about transparency. Or the lack of transparency. Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, who chaired the task force, opened the session by saying, "For too long, the issue of unidentified anomalous phenomena, often called UAP, has been shrouded in secrecy, stigma, and in some cases outright dismissal. This is about national security, government accountability, and the American people's right to know the truth. This is what makes this moment different from decades of UFO speculation. The witnesses are not fringe conspiracy theorists. They are military personnel with impeccable records, security clearances, and direct operational experience. The footage is not blurry, cell phone video from a backyard AI. That is sensor data from advanced military platforms recorded during active operations in contested airspace and resistance. To disclosure does not come from fringe groups. It comes from official offices of the Pentagon. These incidents should have been investigated. which has maintained that they have no verifiable evidence of extraterrestrial activity or technology. The agency uses what they call a rigorous scientific framework and a data-driven approach to better understand UAP. But critics point out that many of the most compelling cases, including the Yemen incident, seem to be explained away with not entirely rational logic. Take the infamous Go Fast video from 2015, showing an object moving fast, apparently flying at high speed over the waves off California. Analysts at ARO ultimately identified it as an optical illusion involving a weather balloon, suggesting the high apparent speed was due to visual distortion and the angle of the Navy's F-18 camera. But pilots witnessed these objects directly, not just on sensors affirming that the explanations do not match their experience. Some analysts have suggested the Yemen balloon could also be a drifting, high-altitude balloon, reflecting sunlight. The theory is it only appears to move quickly, due to motion parallax as the drone camera tracks it and the missile. Perhaps it simply missed. And the angle of the footage makes it look like a direct hit. But former senior intelligence official Luis Elizondo, who testified at the hearing, strongly disputed that explanation. "We have never seen a Hellfire missile hit a target and bounce off," he said, "when a Hellfire missile makes an attack. Kinetic energy and something solid usually leaves little of whatever it hits. It is very, very destructive." So what are we left with? Either the U.S. military has encountered something with technology far beyond our current capabilities, technology that can withstand a direct missile strike and continue operating, or there is a mundane explanation that officials are refusing to share publicly for reasons we can only guess. Both options are not particularly comforting. And this is not an isolated incident. The National UFO Reporting Center has recorded over 2,000 UAP sightings just in the first 6 months of 2025. A significant increase compared to previous years. The Pentagon has received over 750 new reports just between May 2023 and June 2024. Whatever is happening in our skies is happening more frequently, and more people are paying attention while governments struggle with objects in the atmosphere. They cannot explain something much more predictable, but no less dramatic has happened overhead. We are governed by the star that creates all life on Earth. Chapter 12. The Fury of the Sun. The final flare in October 2024, scientists issued a statement that should have dominated headlines, but somehow got lost in the noise of everyday life. The Sun reached solar maximum, the peak of its 11-year activity cycle. For most people, that sounds like dry astronomy. The peak of its 11-year activity cycle sounds like dry astronomy to most people, a kind of matter only important to researchers but not affecting daily existence. However, what is happening with our star right now is not academic at all, and the most intense effects may still lie ahead. This is the thing about the solar maximum that no AI tells you. The peak of solar activity does not mean the end of dramatic events. It means we are entering a truly capable of generating many geomagnetic storms and more spectacular auroras than the maximum itself. Think of it as the brightest fireworks, not at the start but in the final explosive moments before fading away. The Sun is about to show us its last twitch, and that twitch could light up the sky across the planet in the next 2 years. Solar physicist Paul Becker from the Norwegian Space Agency has made it clear that this is good news for aurora hunters. Because the peak auroral activity occurs a few years after the solar maximum, therefore, we will have a few more years of very high auroral activity. Let that sink in a bit. We are not at the end of the show. We are heading towards a spectacular finale to understand why we need to talk about what drives the aurora in the first place during the solar maximum. The surface of the Sun is covered by sunspots, areas of intense magnetic activity where the star's magnetic field lines are tangled and stretched. When these magnetic field lines break and reconnect, they release a huge amount of energy in the form of solar flares and coronal mass ejections. A single CME can hurl billions of tons of plasma into space at speeds exceeding 1,000 miles per hour. When that plasma hits Earth's magnetic field, It causes geomagnetic storms, funneling charged particles towards the poles where they collide with atoms in our atmosphere and create shimmering curtains of light that we call the aurora. But here is where the story gets more interesting. After the solar maximum, the number of flares and CMEs begins to decrease. You might think that means fewer auroras. But you would be wrong, because during the declining phase of the solar cycle, something else happens. Long-lasting coronal holes start forming dark regions in the sun's corona, where magnetic field lines open into space. Allowing fast solar wind streams to escape continuously, these high-speed streams can last for weeks, or even months, attacking Earth's magnetic field with sustained pressure, causing dramatic geomagnetic storms. No less intense than those caused by CME's solar physicist Zhuan Dao explained in this way: during the declining phase, we actually have more geomagnetic storms, even though the sun's eruptive activity slows down a bit. After you reach the peak past the solar maximum, but because you still have coronal holes forming, and you still have quite a few eruptions. When you add them together, you get more frequent and sometimes more intense auroral displays. We saw this happen in early October 2025. Earth experienced 5 consecutive days of geomagnetic activity, driven by a fast solar wind stream from a coronal hole with solar wind speeds reaching 768 km per second, before gradually dropping to 608 km per second. Even at those reduced speeds, the wind was strong enough to cause G-level geomagnetic storms. One or a few individual auroras dancing at northern latitudes can be seen as far south as New York on some nights. Photographers in Iceland, Norway, Canada, and northern USA have captured stunning images of blue, pink, and purple waves of light in the sky, and this is just a warm-up, a small coronal mass ejection from an M-class solar flare. 1.5 in early October. 10 expected to arrive around 8:10, likely to bring another bout of disturbances. Scientists are forecasting that the current solar cycle, cycle 25, could maintain high levels of geomagnetic activity until 2027, or beyond, driven by a combination of remaining eruptions and persistent coronal holes. But there is another factor at play, one unrelated to the sun itself. The orientation of Earth during the equinox season that we are still experiencing in early October makes our planet more vulnerable to geomagnetic storms at the cusp points of Earth's magnetic field. Compared to the incoming solar wind creating conditions that allow more particles to penetrate our defenses and cause stronger auroral displays, it's like opening a door. Usually just ajar, the real implications of all this solar activity go beyond the beautiful lights. Geomagnetic storms can disrupt radio communications and interfere with GPS systems, causing satellite orbits to degrade, and in extreme cases even threatening power grids during a major geomagnetic storm in March 1989, due to a strong solar storm causing the entire province of Quebec to lose power for 9 hours, with transformers overheating, circuit breakers tripping, and millions left in darkness. That storm reached a level G5 or extreme on the geomagnetic storm scale. Storms we are seeing today are mainly from G1 to G3, relatively moderate but still strong enough to cause headaches for satellite operators and airline pilots flying polar routes. Scientists use something called the KP index to measure geomagnetic activity on a scale of 0 to 9. KP of 5 or more indicates storm conditions in the first week of October 2025. The KP index fluctuated around 3 to 5 with short spikes into storm levels. Forecasters predict this pattern will continue, with unsettled conditions to regular activity interspersed with stronger storms occasionally in the coming months. For those of us not operating satellites or managing power grids, the main effect of this solar fury is simply the aurora borealis, one of the most spectacular natural phenomena on Earth. And the next 2 years may bring some of the best viewing opportunities in many decades. If you live at high latitudes above 50 degrees north or south, you will have frequent chances to see the lights, but even those at mid-latitudes down to about 40 degrees or more may catch glimpses during stronger storms. The sun's final outbursts are turning into a light show of the era. But while the sun paints our skies with fire, other celestial visitors are approaching. From deep space, and they are bringing their own show. Chapter 13, Chaos. Comet 3 blue visitors lighting up the November sky. Something strange is happening in October 2025. Look up on a suitable night from a suitable location, and you might see not one, not two, but 3 comets visible simultaneously, all of them blue, all of them discovered this year. And one of them may become bright enough to see with your naked eye, a rare gift in an era. When most comets remain faint, disappointingly, the star of this space program is Comet C 2025A6, better known as Comet Lemon, named after the Mauna Loa Observatory in Arizona, where it was first discovered on March 1, 2025 at discovery. It had a magnitude of 21.5, so faint that astronomers initially thought it might be an asteroid. Only subsequent observations revealing a dense coma and a short tail made its true nature clear. For most of the year, Lemon remained a little-known object, tracked by professional astronomers but largely ignored by the public. Initial predictions suggested it would peak around magnitude 9 near perihelion in early November, bright enough for backyard telescopes, but not visible to the naked eye. Then a surprise happened in mid-August after emerging from conjunction with the Sun. When the comet was hidden in the Sun's glare, observers found it significantly brighter than expected. By 19 August, its magnitude had risen to 11. A sharp, short tail began to appear, and the brightening did not stop. By the end of September, Comet Lemon had reached magnitude 8.9, easily visible with binoculars and small telescopes. Astrophotographers began capturing stunning images showing not only the bright nucleus and surrounding coma, but also a long ion tail streaming away from the Sun, complete with twists and knots as the tail interacted with the solar wind. By 30th September, the comet had brightened to magnitude 6.6. With an ion tail stretching about 3 degrees across the sky and a dust tail also becoming visible. Current forecasts, updated almost daily with new observations, suggest Comet Lemon will reach magnitude 4, possibly even magnitude 3, as it approaches Earth closest on 21st October at a distance of 56 million miles, putting it right on the threshold of naked eye visibility from dark sky locations away from city lights. People may actually spot it as a faint star, and unlike many comets that peak when too close to the Sun for safe observation, Lemon will be well placed in the evening sky about 42 degrees from the Sun. Can be seen in the west about 1 hour after sunset. The comet will continue to brighten after its closest approach, as it heads towards perihelion, the closest point to the Sun on 8/11. The best viewing time is expected to be around Halloween and early November, once Lemon passes through the constellation of Future. For observers in the Northern Hemisphere, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The comet Lemon follows an extremely elongated orbit, and may not return for another 1,355 years if it returns at all, but Lemon is not alone. The comet C/2025 hours 2 Suan was discovered just a few weeks ago, literally. A day before reaching its closest point to the Sun. We did not see it earlier because the bright sunlight obscured it from ground-based telescopes. It was actually discovered by sharp-eyed amateur astronomers Vladimir Bezuli and Michael Matiasso in images taken by the SWAN instrument on NASA's Solar and Heliospheric Observatory, a space telescope designed to study the Sun, hence the name SWAN. This comet will not brighten much as it is currently moving away from the Sun, but it will become easier to see, as it creates more distance between itself and the Sun's glare from our viewpoint. On 2010, it will make its closest approach to Earth at about 24,000 miles. Spectacular photos have captured its tail stretching across the star Spica this weekend. It will pass within 1 degree of Mars, creating a great photo opportunity for astrophotographers, who can frame both objects together. The third member of this cosmic trio is the Comet C/2025. K-18 Atlas, named after the final warning system for asteroid impacts with Earth, a survey designed to find near-Earth asteroids, but smart enough to detect Comet K-18 Atlas and more than 2 other comets. but it is brightening as it approaches the sun. It will be best observed before dawn in the coming weeks. For patient observers with binoculars or small telescopes, both comets appear blue-green. The color comes from diatomic carbon molecules made of two carbon atoms bonded together. They absorb sunlight and re-emit it at a wavelength that the human eye perceives as blue-green. As a comet approaches the sun, solar radiation breaks down larger organic molecules in their icy nucleus, releasing diatomic carbon into the coma. The closer they get, the more carbon is released, and they glow more blue-green. Interestingly, there is a fourth blue-green comet currently also visible. Although much harder to detect, the visitor C/3IATLAS is just the second comet from beyond. Our solar system recently discovered it has abandoned its deep red color and turned turquoise, as it interacts with solar radiation in ways we are still trying to understand, but that is a story we will return to soon. The comet. Lemon has exceeded all expectations, and there is real excitement in the astronomy community about how bright it might become. Nick James, director of the Comet Division of the British Astronomical Association, told Space Weather, "This comet is developing very well and has been an impressive object with a favorable position for morning sky observation. It is definitely worth waking up for. Unpredictability is part of what makes comets so fascinating. They are not like planets or stars that follow predictable paths and maintain stable brightness. Wild comets often sometimes disappoint, but occasionally spectacular. They can brighten in sudden outbursts, break apart without warning, or fade away, just when a show was expected. Predicting a comet's behavior is like forecasting the weather. 6 months ahead, you can make educated guesses, based on physics and past behavior, but nature always has the right to surprise you, and surprises exactly. What we are getting in October 2025, two blue-green comets are racing across our sky at once. One comet visible to the naked eye, the sun bursting with auroral activity, dancing at mid-latitudes. Asteroids sneaking past our defenses, and on Mars, a rock covered with floral patterns. Maybe fossils of ancient life. But while all this cosmic drama unfolds naturally, a company is preparing to launch the most powerful rocket ever built, a machine that could revolutionize space travel, or become another footnote in the long history of ambitious failures. Chapter 14. The Final Act of Starship. The Moment of Success or Failure for SpaceX. 13/10/2025. Remember that date. If everything goes according to plan, and with SpaceX, it is never a guarantee. The world will witness Starship's 11th test flight, the tallest and most powerful rocket ever built. But this is not just another launch. The 11th flight will be the last time we see Starship. Version 2. Fly. Everything after this will be bigger, stronger, and theoretically more reliable. The question is whether version 2 can end successfully, or if it will add another explosion. To a year that has already seen too many, let's talk about the obvious issue. 2025 has not been kind to Starship. The year started with 7 consecutive explosive failures, shaking confidence in the entire program. The 7th flight in January saw the upper stage called Ship suffer a catastrophic breakup during initial burn. 4 of its 6 engines shut down early, causing loss of attitude control and complete loss of telemetry. The vehicle's breakup was visible from Florida, Jamaica, and the Turks and Caicos Islands. The 8th flight in March initially seemed successful. The Super Heavy booster was caught by the mechanical arms of the launch tower, an incredible achievement. But the Ship 34 had 4 engines shut down during burn, lost control, and broke apart 9.5 minutes after liftoff. Then the 9th flight in May used the program's first reused Super Heavy booster, another milestone. But once again, the upper stage did not complete its mission. 7 consecutive failures. 7 lost ships, 7 investigations, 7 redesigns and promises that next time would be different. The 10th flight in August finally broke the streak of 7 failures. Everything worked. The booster landed in the water as planned. The ship completed its suborbital arc, re-entered the atmosphere with its heat shield intact, and performed a controlled splashdown in the Gulf. It even managed to deploy Starlink satellites on the flight, an important proof of capability for the first time in many months. SpaceX and supporters could finally breathe a sigh of relief. Now comes the 11th flight, scheduled for 6:15 p.m. Central Time on 13/10, launching from Starbase in South Texas. The mission profile looks similar to the 10th flight, but with some key differences making it more ambitious and potentially riskier. The booster being used is designated B-15, previously flown on the 8th flight in March. It was successfully caught during that mission, making it proven hardware. This flight, it is equipped with 24 Raptor engines. Proven through flight means both the booster and most of its engines have already endured the stresses of launch and landing. But here's the difference. Instead of trying to catch it with the tower again, B-15 will perform a unique engine configuration for the landing burn that SpaceX plans to use on the next-generation Super Heavy booster. The booster will ignite 13 engines at the start of the landing burn, then switch to a new configuration with 5 engines operating during the phase called the flip. Previously, this phase only used 2 engines. The approach: the 5 new engines add redundancy in case an engine shuts down automatically, a problem that has troubled some flights. Finally, the booster will switch to its 2 center engines to finish the landing burn, hovering completely over the Gulf of Mexico before shutting down and falling into the water. SpaceX calls this a stress test. They want to measure the vehicle's real-world dynamics when engines shut down, and restart at different stages of the burn. If it works, it will confirm the approach for version 2 if it fails. At least it will fail on water rather than near a booster launch failure on ship. 3IAT has its own ambitious agenda. It will deploy 8 Starlink mock-up models with similar size and mass to the next generation, Starlink satellites that SpaceX plans to launch commercially. These mock-ups will not actually operate as satellites. They are in the same orbit, suborbital with Starship, and will burn up upon re-entry, but deploying them will test the mechanisms and procedures necessary for actual missions. Starship 38 will also attempt to reactivate one of its Raptor engines, while in space demonstrating the ability to perform maneuvers beyond simple inertial flight. This capability is essential for future missions to the Moon, Mars, or anywhere else. Requiring precise orbital adjustments next is the heat shield test, and this is where things become deliberately dangerous. Engineers have removed heat shield panels from some areas of Starship 38 to intentionally test the pressure on weak points across the vehicle. Some missing panels are in areas without backup ablative protection underneath. If plasma from the re-entry process finds its way through those gaps, it could burn the structure and cause catastrophic failure, but Starship needs to know exactly where the weaknesses are and how much damage it can withstand before failing. The only way to find out is to push it until something breaks. Assuming Starship 38 survives re-entry, it will perform a propulsive tilt maneuver during descent, finally testing the supersonic guidance algorithms necessary for future flights returning to the launch site. Then a landing burn and touchdown in the Indian Ocean, hopefully in one piece. All of this is building towards the BA version, the Starship variant that SpaceX believes will ultimately make the system operational. The BA version ships will be larger with more fuel capacity and greater payload mass. The booster stages will use more engines and generate even greater thrust. Most importantly, the design incorporates lessons learned from 10 previous test flights and countless 7 booster failures and near misses, but none of that matters if the 11th flight goes off course. If Starship 38 breaks apart during the heat shield pressure test critics will point to, it is evidence of fundamental flaws in Starship. If the new 7 booster landing burn configuration fails, it will raise questions about whether that approach is viable, and if anything spectacularly goes wrong in public, it could affect SpaceX's relationship with NASA. the agency relying on Starship to carry astronauts to the Moon on the Artemis mission. BA in 2027, the risk level could not be higher. Starship is not just a rocket, it is central to SpaceX's vision. For the future of space travel, it is supposed to make orbital access cheap and frequent. It is supposed to enable colonization of Mars. It is supposed to revolutionize satellite deployment with on-orbit refueling, and ultimately carry humans beyond Earth on journeys currently only found in science fiction. But first it must stop exploding. The 11th flight is SpaceX's chance to prove that version 2 can complete its journey, successfully paving the way for the BA era. The launch window opens on 1310. Millions will watch. And in the silence before ignition, everyone will think the same thing. Please don't explode. While SpaceX races to perfect its giant rocket, another nation is conducting a mission. Billions of miles from Earth towards a target that may hold secrets about the violent past of our very own Moon Chang'e 5 China's bold mission of Tianwen-2 on 28/5/2025. At 0131 local time in China, a Long March BAB rocket soared into the night sky above. The Xichang Satellite Launch Center in Sichuan Province most of the world barely noticed. But what that rocket carries into space could answer one of the strangest mysteries in our cosmic neighborhood. Is there a piece of the Moon drifting in orbit around Earth masquerading as an asteroid or not? This spacecraft is called Tianwen-2, the second mission in China's planetary exploration program. Tianwen-1 reached Mars carrying an orbiter and a rover still operational to this day. Tianwen-BA will attempt to return samples from Mars, potentially beating NASA's struggling Mars Sample Return program. Tianwen-4 will visit Jupiter and Uranus in a single mission, but Tianwen-2 has a much closer target. And, much more mysterious, is an object called Kamahualewa, also known as Asteroid 2016 HO3. HO3. Kamahualewa is what astronomers call a quasi-satellite, a near-Earth object that seems to orbit our planet even though it is actually orbiting the Sun. Its orbit is synchronized with Earth in such a way that, from our point of view, it looks like it is dancing around us, never straying too far, never being pulled away. This asteroid measures between 40 and 100 meters in diameter, roughly the size of a carousel. It completes one orbit around the Sun every 365 days, almost exactly matching Earth's year. And it has been performing this strange dance for at least a century, possibly much longer. But here is what makes Kamahualewa truly strange: its spectrum, how it reflects sunlight. It's very similar to types of weathered lunar rock. In 2021, astronomer Ben Saki led a study suggesting that this asteroid might actually be a giant rock, ejected from the Moon by an ancient impact. The name Kamahualewa originates from a Hawaiian creation chant referring to a child traveling alone, a poetic description of a fragment of the Moon, wandering in space while still close to its parent. If this theory is correct, Kamahualewa could tell us about the Moon's bombardment history, the size and energy of impacts that have shaped the lunar surface, and even provide pristine lunar material samples uncontaminated by Earth's environment. But there is another possibility for Kamahualewa. It could instead be a main belt asteroid that somehow migrated into a quasi-captured orbit near Earth through gravitational interactions we do not yet fully understand. That would also be fascinating, revealing the migration paths through the solar system that current models do not predict. The only way to know for sure is to go there and collect samples. That is exactly what Tianwen-2 is designed to do. On 6 June, just over a week after launch, China's National Space Administration released the first update on the mission. The spacecraft is operating normally and has traveled over 3,000 kilometers from Earth. A photo showing one of Tianwen-2's solar panels was taken by a drifting camera against the blackness of space. The image is simple, almost ordinary, but it confirms the spacecraft is still alive and well. Tianwen-2 is currently on a year-long journey to Kamohoalawa. When it arrives in 2026, it will spend another year orbiting this tiny asteroid, studying it up close, mapping its shape and surface, measuring its mass and composition. This will be extremely challenging. Kamohoalawa is the smallest asteroid ever targeted by a space mission, and it rotates once every 28 minutes, making it the fastest spinning object ever visited by a spacecraft. Landing on something so small and fast spinning is like trying to grab a carousel while blindfolded. China plans to use several sampling techniques. The first is the hovering approach, where the lander matches the asteroid's rotation while collecting material. The second is a touch-and-go maneuver, similar to what NASA's OSIRIS-REx and Japan's Hayabusa 2 missions successfully used. The spacecraft briefly contacts the surface to collect a sample and immediately takes off. The third, most ambitious method involves using drills on the lander's legs to anchor the spacecraft to the asteroid's surface, allowing more controlled sampling over a longer period. The goal is to collect at least 100 grams, a bit over 3 ounces. That may not sound like much, but when sampling an asteroid 40 million miles from Earth with an autonomous robotic spacecraft due to communication delays, every gram is precious. Once the samples are secured, Tianwen-2 will begin its journey home in 2028. About 2.5 years after launch, it will approach Earth and release a re-entry capsule containing the asteroid samples. That capsule will have to withstand an entry speed of 12.1 kilometers per second, faster than anything returning from the Moon, generating temperatures and pressures that will push China's heat shield technology to its limits. But this is when the mission becomes even more ambitious. After releasing the sample capsule, Tianwen-2 will not retire. Instead, it will use Earth for a gravity assist maneuver, throwing itself into a transfer orbit to a completely different target, main belt Comet BA1-1P/Pan stars. The journey will take about 7 years if everything works out. Tianwen-2 will arrive at the comet in the mid-2030s, orbiting it, and conduct remote sensing studies of this strange hybrid object with characteristics of both an asteroid and a comet. The entire mission is designed to last 10 years. A spacecraft with 2 completely different objectives returning samples from a standard satellite, then a rendezvous with the main belt comet. It is bold, complex, and if successful will demonstrate capabilities possessed by only a few countries. More importantly, it is a direct challenge to U.S. space dominance while NASA struggles with budget cuts, downsizing, and political interference. China is carrying out a carefully planned robotic exploration program, well-funded and steadily progressing towards increasingly ambitious goals. Tianwen-2 was launched on schedule. It is operating normally, and by 2028 it may bring the first samples from Kamohoalawa to laboratories on Earth. If those samples confirm the asteroid is a fragment of the Moon, China will answer a major scientific question and demonstrate its technical capabilities in deep space operations. If NASA's Mars sample return program continues to stall while China brings back rocks from an entire asteroid, and eventually Mars, the symbolic implications cannot be ignored. The space race is not over. It is just entering a new phase, a phase where the finish line keeps moving and competitors are running very different races. China is playing a strategic game, building capabilities, methodically launching missions, collecting data and proving that patient, sustainable investment in space exploration will pay off. Right now, Tianwen is millions of kilometers away and getting further, riding sunlight and ion propulsion towards a target most people have never heard of. But when it arrives, when it collects its samples, when those samples come home, the world will pay attention, because by then, another country will have done what only the U.S., Japan, and now China can claim to have successfully returned material from beyond the Moon. But while China steadily pushes its space program with clear goals and stable funding, the U.S. space agency that once put humans on the Moon is facing an existential crisis threatening to break. Decades of achievements and wipe out launched missions. Chapter 16. NASA in crisis shutdown, layoffs, and the War for Science at 12:01 a.m. On 1/10/2025, the U.S. federal government officially shut down within hours. 15,000 NASA employees were notified of unpaid leave and sent home. Laboratories went silent, offices closed, research stalled for most of the agency. Work stopped completely, but not for everyone, a small portion of NASA's workforce. Just over 3,000 people were classified as essential and required to continue working. They will not be paid during the shutdown. They will log their hours and hope to be paid back when the government reopens, but they must be present because the work they do, literally, keeps spacecraft alive. Mission control operations for the International Space Station continue uninterrupted. Ground controllers still monitor life support systems, prepare and verify commands, and respond to emergencies. About 1,000 commands per day are sent from Earth to the ISS to maintain operations and keep the crew safe. If those controllers were furloughed, astronauts' lives would be at risk. So they work unpaid, while Congress argues over the budget. Another major casualty of the shutdown is the Artemis program, NASA's effort to return humans to the Moon. Administrator Sadafy clarified the agency's priorities in a social media post before the shutdown. China will not come to the Moon with good intentions. The implication is very clear. Beat China. Reaching the lunar surface is considered such an important national security mandate that thousands of workers and contractors are exempted from taking leave. This includes staff working on Artemis II, the crewed test flight around the Moon, expected as early as 2026, and Artemis BA, the actual moon landing mission, planned for mid-2027. It also includes contractors at SpaceX and Blue Origin, developing lunar landers and other hardware for the program. Those contractors are required to continue working during the shutdown, recording their time, without immediate payment because Artemis cannot be delayed any further. But this is what the shutdown does not tell you. The crisis at NASA began long before 1 October 2025, the Office of Management and Budget and the administrators. NASA issued directives to cut more than 4,000 agency staff from late September to 1 September 2026. Thousands of long-serving NASA employees are leaving through early retirement offers. This is not unpaid leave. These are permanent departures. Over 20% of NASA's workforce has left, and it's not just numbers. These resignations include top talents, engineers who worked on Artemis systems, scientists managing planetary missions, experts in fields such as power systems, propulsion, and life support. A NASA employee at Johnson Space Center in Houston, speaking anonymously, said the agency has lost at least one of the top experts in power systems, a serious blow to the development of nuclear reactors needed to generate power on the Moon. The exodus is driven by budget uncertainty and political pressure. President Trump's proposed budget for fiscal year 2026 requests the lowest NASA funding since 1961. Adjusted for inflation, that was the year Alan Shepard became the first American in space. The budget proposal includes a brutal 47% cut to NASA's science programs if enacted. It would cancel 41 missions, including spacecraft already launched and conducting discoveries. Let that sink in a bit. 41 missions canceled are not missions still planned or in development. These are missions already flying, telescopes already observing distant galaxies, probes already exploring other planets, satellites already monitoring Earth's climate. The proposal would literally slap spacecraft that have traveled the solar system for many decades, wasting billions of taxpayer dollars, and erase knowledge that can never be recovered. The list of threatened missions reads like a list of humanity's greatest achievements in space exploration. The Nancy Grace Roman Space Telescope, a leading observatory designed to discover hundreds of thousands of exoplanets and survey over 1 billion galaxies, would be canceled despite being nearly complete. OSIRIS-REx, currently en route to study the Apophis asteroid on its 2029 Earth flyby, would be shut down mid-mission. the Mars Sample Return mission, despite having samples on Mars waiting to come home, would be abandoned, potentially allowing China to beat the U.S. in returning Martian material to Earth. Even missions that have proven their worth are not safe. The Chandra X-ray Observatory has observed high-energy universe since '99 and made discoveries that reshaped astrophysics, is on the chopping block. The Hubble Space Telescope, perhaps the most famous scientific instrument ever built, could be cut or eliminated. Mission support cuts proposed. Not only affect space exploration, Earth science missions monitoring climate change, deforestation, measuring sea level rise and providing essential data for weather forecasting and disaster response are also targeted. Planetary defense programs designed to find and track asteroids that could threaten Earth would face funding cuts. Just before recently, asteroid 2025 TF unexpectedly flew by. NASA whistleblowers have spoken out noting that imposing a budget not approved by Congress is illegal and challenges constitutional principles. NASA's legal office should know better, one said. And challenge constitutional principles. NASA's legal office should know better than one person says. They should know that what this administration is doing is breaking NASA's procedures. NASA regulations and not complying with Congress's will, but violations continue, often hidden from public view. The human cost of these launches goes beyond NASA staff. Universities nationwide rely on NASA grants to fund research and pay graduate students. When grant payments are halted during shutdowns and budget cuts, entire research programs can collapse. Professors find themselves unable to pay their teams. Students lose funding midway. Decades of expertise and accumulated knowledge within organizations evaporate, as people are forced to leave the field entirely. Astrophysicist Stefan Himmler from Johns Hopkins University, who leads NASA-related sounding rocket efforts, said the disruption has affected financial availability calculations. He had to go to his university to request emergency funding, just to get through the next launch, and he is one of the lucky ones working at a major research institute, with resources to soften the shock. Smaller programs at less wealthy universities have no safety net. Meanwhile, international partners are anxiously watching NASA's cooperation with the European Space Agency on missions such as Mars Sample Return and the Atomist program involving binding agreements and shared costs. When NASA unilaterally changes plans or cancels missions, it strains relationships, built over decades, and undermines America's reputation as a reliable partner. Perhaps most damaging is the loss of public trust. And space exploration science is a long game. Missions take years or decades to plan, build, launch, and execute. You cannot just pause a planetary probe midway and restart it later. You cannot delay a mission to Jupiter by a year and expect planetary alignment to wait. Orbital mechanics laws do not care about budget cycles or political priorities. When continuity breaks, when programs are canceled and restarted multiple times, when talented people leave and are not replaced, damage increases. Every canceled mission is a discovery not made. Every lost expert is decades of experience gone. Every shutdown requires painful rebuilding from scratch, and yet there is still hope. The space community is fighting back. Protests have been held outside NASA headquarters in Washington, D.C., with staff and supporters, demanding full funding and an end to cuts. Legislators from both parties, especially those representing districts with major NASA facilities, have opposed administration proposals. The House and Senate have passed budget allocation laws exceeding the president's request. Although, as of early October, nothing is finalized. The question is whether this resistance is enough. Will Congress assert its constitutional authority over federal spending and refuse budget cuts that would weaken America's leadership role in space? If the public demands, their representatives defend the agency that gave us moon landings, Mars rovers, the Hubble and Webb telescopes, and decades of discoveries that expanded human knowledge and inspired generations, or not. Because right now, NASA stands at a crossroads. One path leads to continued exploration, scientific discovery, and America's leadership role in space. The other leads to managed decline, canceled missions, lost expertise, and watching from the sidelines. As other nations surge ahead, a choice not made by scientists or engineers, but by politicians and officials, many of whom will never see the consequences of their decisions, while those who have devoted their lives to exploring the universe watch their work dismantled piece by piece. This is 10 2025 asteroids fly by undetected. Potential signs of life. Frozen on Mars. UFOs appear in military footage without satisfactory explanation. The sun flares through its final active phase. Comets rush towards us from the darkness of China. Carrying out ambitious missions with clear goals and stable funding. A private company. Building the most powerful rocket in history, while a government agency that once sent humans to another world is struggling to maintain space operations, indifferent to budget debates or our political squabbles. It continues its ancient dance, indifferent to whether we choose to watch exploration research or simply look away and pretend that space does not matter. But it truly does. Every discovery we make, every question we answer, every mystery we illuminate contributes to the overall understanding of humanity and reminds us that we are part of something much larger than ourselves, and right now, we are at risk of forgetting that truth at exactly the moment we need to speak it the most.